The Valithian Empire stretched across the stars like a glittering spiderweb, their cities suspended in orbit around dying suns. These aliens were not flesh and blood, but beings of living crystal, their translucent bodies refracting light into dazzling rainbows. They thrived on order, precision, and symmetry, drawing energy from the chaotic forces of collapsing stars to power their immense floating metropolises. To them, the universe was a grand equation waiting to be solved, except for one variable they could never quite understand. Humanity. Humans had stumbled into interstellar politics centuries ago, their first ships little more than patched together. Scraps of metal and hope. In the eyes of the Valithians, humans were an anomaly and unpredictable species that defied logic at every turn. Where other civilizations built empires through careful planning and meticulous execution, humans seemed to stumble forward blindly, fueled by emotions and instincts rather than reason. Their lifespans were fleeting, their ambitions outsized, and their methods chaotic. To the Valithians, humans were less like equals and more like pests, clumsy, short-lived creatures who occasionally made noise but ultimately amounted to nothing significant. Most alien races either ignored Earth or treated its people with condescension, viewing human achievements as trivial compared to the technological marvels of older civilizations. But despite this dismissal, humanity persisted, carving out small pockets of influence in the galaxy while dreaming of something greater. It was during one such moment of persistence that Cale Armitage found himself face to face with the enigmatic rulers of the stars. A mechanic by trade, Cale wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the Valithian delegation visiting Earth's orbital station, Solace Prime. He was just there to fix a malfunctioning maintenance drone when he overheard the soft hum of voices emanating from the ceremonial chamber. Curiosity got the better of him, and before he knew it, he was peering through the cracked doorway. Inside, the room shimmered with an otherworldly glow. The Valithian ambassador stood atop a pedestal, her crystalline form casting prismatic reflections across the walls. Around her neck hung a crown, a delicate lattice of shimmering energy threads that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. It was said to symbolize the unity of the Valithian people, a relic of immeasurable importance. Yet now something was wrong. The threads flickered erratically, threatening to unravel entirely. A group of human engineers huddled nearby, visibly flustered as they tried and failed to repair the artifact. "We're sorry, Ambassador," one of them stammered. "Our tools aren't compatible with your technology. We don't know how to stabilize it." The ambassador tilted her head slightly, her voice resonating like wind chimes. "Your kind has always been limited. Perhaps this is why you remain irrelevant among the stars." Cale clenched his fists. Irrelevant? That word burned in his chest, though he couldn't explain why. Before he could stop himself, he stepped into the room. "Let me try," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of everyone's stares. The engineers turned to him in disbelief. You're just a grease monkey." But Cale didn't back down. Growing up on Earth, he'd learned early on that sometimes all you needed was determination and a willingness to think outside the box. His hands moved instinctively, pulling tools from his belt as he approached the ambassador. For a moment, she studied him with those multifaceted eyes, unreadable yet piercing. Then, with a subtle nod, she lowered her head so he could reach the crown. As Cale worked, the room fell silent except for the occasional hum of his tools. The crown's threads steadied under his touch, their erratic pulses calming until they glowed with a soft, steady light. When he finally stepped back, the ambassador raised her hand to feel the repaired artifact. She paused, then turned to look directly at him, her gaze locked onto his, and for the first time, Cale felt truly seen, not as some insignificant human, but as someone worthy of attention. Her voice rang out, clear and haunting. "Do you love human?" The question caught him off guard, sending a shiver down his spine. Love? What did that even mean coming from her? Before he could respond, the ambassador turned away, her crystalline form shimmering as she disappeared through the doorway. The room erupted into murmurs, but Cale barely heard them. All he could think about was the way she'd looked at him, and the strange, unshakable feeling that this encounter was only the beginning. Little did he know, his simple act of fixing a crown would set off a chain of events that would challenge everything both humans and the Lithians thought they knew about each other and themselves. The days following Kale's encounter with the Velithian ambassador were anything but ordinary. News of his unexpected success spread quickly through Solus Prime, though no one seemed to agree on what it meant. Some called him a hero, others dismissed him as lucky, and a few whispered that he might have somehow offended the ambassador with his clumsy human hands. But for Kale, the real mystery wasn't how people saw him, it was the question she had asked, "Do you love me, human?" Those words echoed in his mind like a riddle he couldn't solve. Love wasn't something he associated with alien diplomacy or crystalline beings who thrived on logic and order. Yet there was no denying the weight behind her question or the way she had looked at him when she asked it. It felt personal, intimate even, as if she were searching for something deeper than gratitude or admiration. Kale tried to push the memory aside and return to his work, but fate had other plans. 2 days later, an official summons arrived via holographic message. The Velithians requested his presence aboard their flagship, the Prism Nexus, currently docked near Earth's orbital station. The message was polite yet firm, leaving no room for refusal. As Kale boarded the sleek, angular vessel, he couldn't help but feel out of place. Everything about the ship was alien: the smooth, glass-like corridors that hummed faintly underfoot, the glowing sigils etched into the walls, and the eerie silence broken only by the occasional shimmer of light. A pair of Velithian guards escorted him to a grand chamber where the ambassador awaited. She stood at the center of the room, her crystalline form casting intricate patterns of light across the floor. This time she wore no crown, but her presence was no less commanding. Around her, several other Velithians gathered, their forms slightly smaller and less radiant than hers, suggesting they were advisors or aides. Kale swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. "You repaired my crown," the ambassador began, her voice resonating softly. "A task many of your kind deemed impossible." Kale nodded, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. "I just did what I could," he replied cautiously. "It wasn't anything special." Her multifaceted eyes narrowed ever so slightly, catching the light in a way that made them seem almost alive. "Modesty is rare among your species. Most humans boast of their achievements, seeking recognition above all else. Yet you downplay yours. Why?" Kale hesitated. He hadn't expected this line of questioning. "I guess because fixing things is what I do," he said finally. "It's not about being recognized. It's about making sure something works again, whether it's a drone, a spaceship, or a crown." The room fell silent, the Velithians exchanging subtle glances. To Kale, it felt like they were silently communicating, though he couldn't tell what they were thinking. Finally, the ambassador spoke again. "What drives you, human? What compels you to act when others would give up?" This time, Kale didn't hesitate. "Hope," he said simply. "Even when things look impossible, we keep trying. Because giving up means losing everything." The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, the ambassador said nothing, her gaze fixed on him as if weighing his response. Then, without warning, she gestured to one of her aides, who stepped forward holding a small device, a sphere of shifting colors that pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "This is a fragment of our core technology," she explained. "It regulates the energy flow within our cities, ensuring stability. But recently it has begun to destabilize. If it fails, millions will perish." Kale stared at the sphere, its pulsing lights mesmerizing yet unsettling. "And you want me to fix it?" he asked, incredulous. "We wish to observe your methods," the ambassador clarified. "Your species' approach to problem-solving intrigues us. While others rely on calculations and precision, you act on instinct and emotion. We seek to understand why." For a moment, Kale considered refusing. After all, this wasn't his responsibility. He was just a mechanic, not some interstellar savior. But then he remembered the ambassador's earlier question, her curiosity about love, and realized this was more than just a test of skill. It was a chance to prove something greater, that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its tools or intellect, but in its heart. Taking a deep breath, Kale accepted the sphere and set to work. As the Velithians watched intently, he examined the device, running his fingers over its surface and listening to its faint hums. Unlike the crown, this object was far more complex, its mechanisms seemingly designed to resist tampering. Yet instead of frustration, Kale felt a spark of determination. There was always a solution, no matter how hidden. Hours passed, and the tension in the room grew palpable. The Velithians shifted uneasily, their crystalline forms refracting anxious bursts of light. At one point, an aide approached the ambassador and whispered urgently, but she silenced them with a sharp glance. All the while, Kale remained focused, his movements steady and deliberate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sphere stabilized. Its erratic pulses smoothed into a gentle rhythm, and the room brightened as if relieved. The Velithians murmured in astonishment, their voices blending into a harmonious hum. Even the ambassador seemed taken aback, though she quickly masked her surprise. "How did you succeed where others failed?" she asked, her tone softer now. Kale shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. "Sometimes you don't need perfect answers. You just need to care enough to try." Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable yet piercing. For the first time, Kale sensed a flicker of respect in her expression, a crack in the cold, logical facade of the Velithians. Whatever doubts they had harbored about humanity were beginning to shift, though neither side fully understood why. But as Kale left the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The ambassador's curiosity ran deeper than repairing artifacts, and so did her questions. Kale returned to Earth's orbital station, Solace Prime, carrying a strange mix of pride and unease. The Velithians had thanked him for stabilizing their core fragment, though their gratitude felt distant, almost clinical. Still, word of his success spread quickly among the human crew stationed there. Some hailed him as a hero who had proven humanity's worth to the galaxy's elite. Others whispered warnings, fearful that drawing too much attention from the Velithians might lead to trouble for Kale. However, the real challenge wasn't fame or fear, it was understanding why the ambassador had chosen him specifically. She could have called upon any number of engineers or scientists, yet she summoned a mechanic with grease-stained hands and no formal training in alien technology. Her questions about hope and love lingered in his mind like an unsolved puzzle, gnawing at him whenever he tried to focus on anything else. Days turned into weeks, and life aboard Solace Prime resumed its usual rhythm. But then came the message, a distress signal from a remote outpost near the edge of Velithian territory. The transmission was fragmented, but one thing was clear. Something catastrophic was happening to the Crystalline Empire. Energy flows were destabilizing across their cities, causing widespread blackouts and threatening the lives of millions. Without immediate intervention, entire populations would be lost. The United Earth Coalition scrambled to respond, but tensions ran high. Many argued that humanity owed nothing to the Velithians, who had long dismissed them as irrelevant. Why should we risk our lives for a species that treats us like children? Demanded Captain Ria Torres, head of the Coalition's diplomatic fleet. Her voice carried weight, and her skepticism resonated with many, but Kale saw things differently. He remembered the ambassador's gaze, the way she had looked at him not as some insignificant human, but as someone capable of making a difference. If humanity refused to help now, it would only reinforce the Velithians' belief that humans lacked empathy and ingenuity. And worse, it would mean abandoning millions of innocent lives to chaos. "I'll go," Kale volunteered during an emergency meeting of Earth's Leadership Council. His declaration silenced the room. Heads turned toward him, eyebrows raised in disbelief. "You're just a mechanic," someone muttered under their breath. Kale ignored the comment and stood firm. "I've worked with their tech before. I know how they think, or at least how they don't. Maybe that gives me an edge." After a heated debate, the council reluctantly agreed to send a small team led by Kale to investigate. They weren't expecting miracles. They simply hoped to gather intelligence and assess the situation. As Kale prepared for the mission, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just another repair job. Something bigger was at stake, something that went beyond fixing broken machines. When the human delegation arrived at the affected region, the scale of the crisis became undeniable. Once gleaming Velithian cities floated dark and silent in orbit around dying stars, their crystalline structures dimmed and fractured. Streams of refugees fled in panic, their forms shimmering faintly as they sought safety. Amid the chaos, Kale spotted the ambassador herself overseeing evacuation efforts, her crown restored and glowing faintly against the gloom. She greeted the humans with a mixture of surprise and relief. "You came," she said, her voice tinged with emotion, an unusual display for a being known for its stoicism. "We didn't come because we owe you," Kale replied honestly. "We came because it's the right thing to do." The ambassador studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me?" She led them to the heart of the nearest city, where a massive energy conduit pulsed erratically, threatening to collapse. Entirely, the device was unlike anything Kale had seen before, a towering structure of interwoven crystal strands that hummed with unstable power. Surrounding it were dozens of Velithian technicians, their movements frantic yet futile. Despite their advanced tools and calculations, they couldn't stabilize the flow. "This is the source of the instability," the ambassador explained. "If it fails, the entire network will unravel." Kale stepped forward, examining the conduit closely. Its complexity was staggering, far beyond anything he'd encountered before. Yet, instead of feeling overwhelmed, he felt a spark of determination. Humans thrived in moments of uncertainty, relying on creativity and intuition when logic fell short. This was their moment to shine. As Kale worked, the Velithians watched in silence, their crystalline forms reflecting the chaotic light of the conduit. He experimented with unconventional methods, using improvised tools and techniques that seemed reckless to the precise-minded aliens. At one point, he even asked the ambassador to channel her own energy through the system, a risky move that shocked both humans and Velithians alike. "Are you certain this will work?" she asked, her voice laced with doubt. "No," Kale admitted. "But doing nothing guarantees failure." Slowly but surely, the conduit began to stabilize. Its erratic pulses smoothed into a steady rhythm, and the surrounding city flickered back to life. Cheers erupted from the Velithians, their crystalline bodies glowing brighter with renewed hope. For the first time, Kale saw genuine gratitude in their expressions, a stark contrast to the cold indifference they had shown humanity in the past. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. Not all Velithians welcomed human involvement. Some viewed Kale's success as a threat to their dominance, while others questioned whether humanity's emotional approach could truly solve the larger problem. Whispers of dissent spread, and Kale sensed that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Still, as he stood beside the ambassador, watching the city come back to life, he felt a glimmer of hope, not just for the Velithians, but for the fragile bond forming between their two species. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or intellect. It was its ability to care, to persevere, and to find solutions where none seemed possible. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was enough to change the course of history. But as the ambassador turned to him, her gaze intense and searching, Kale knew the hardest part was yet to come. "Tell me, human," she said softly, "what drives your kind to act when all seems lost?" Her question hung in the air, unanswered for now. The stabilization of the first energy conduit was a victory, but it came at a cost. The Velithian cities were vast and interconnected, and while Kale's efforts had saved one city from collapse, dozens more teetered on the brink of disaster. The ambassador, her crystalline form glowing faintly in the dim light of the dying star, turned to him with an expression that mirrored both gratitude and desperation. "We cannot delay," she said, her voice resonating like wind chimes caught in a storm. "If we do not act quickly, the instability will spread further. Millions will perish." Kale nodded, though his heart sank under the weight of responsibility. He wasn't just fixing machines anymore. He was holding up entire civilizations, by sheer willpower and ingenuity. But as he looked around at the fractured conduits, the panicked Velithian refugees, and the growing tension among their leaders, he realized something crucial. This wasn't just about repairing technology. It was about proving humanity's value not through words, but through action. The turning point came unexpectedly during a routine inspection of another destabilized conduit. This time, Kale wasn't alone. A team of human engineers accompanied him, each bringing their unique skills to the task. Together, they worked tirelessly, experimenting with unorthodox methods that defied Velithian logic. They used improvised tools, rewired systems on the fly, and even incorporated fragments of Earth-based tech into the alien machinery. To the Velithians, these actions seemed reckless, almost chaotic. But Kale knew better. Sometimes chaos was exactly what you needed to restore order. As the humans labored, the Velithians observed silently, their crystalline bodies shimmering faintly in the flickering light. Among them stood a group of dissenters, Velithian elders who viewed humanity's involvement with suspicion. One elder, a towering figure with jagged edges that refracted light into sharp beams, stepped forward. "This is folly," he declared, his voice cutting through the air like shattered glass. "Your primitive methods risk everything. We should abandon this city and focus our resources elsewhere." Kale paused mid-repair, his hands hovering over the conduit. He glanced at the ambassador who stood nearby, her expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the elder. "Abandoning this city means abandoning everyone here," he said firmly. "And if we give up now, how long before the same happens to your other cities? You can't outrun instability forever." The elder's multifaceted eyes narrowed, catching the light in a way that made him look almost menacing. "You presume to lecture us, human? Your kind has survived only through luck and irrelevance. What makes you think you have any place in solving our problems?" Before Kale could respond, the ambassador interjected, her voice calm yet commanding. "Luck does not save cities, Elder Zirith, nor does pride. These humans have succeeded where we have failed. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our assumptions." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. For a moment no one spoke. The elder's form shimmered angrily, but he said nothing more, retreating to join his fellow dissenters. The room fell silent except for the hum of the conduit and the soft clinking of tools in the human's hands. Kale returned to work, but the exchange weighed heavily on him. It wasn't just the elder's hostility that troubled him, it was the realization that the Velithians were struggling not just with their failing technology, but with their own identity. Their empire was built on perfection, symmetry, and control. To accept help from flawed, emotional beings like humans meant confronting the possibility that their ideals weren't as infallible as they believed. Hours later, the conduit stabilized. Once again, its erratic pulses smoothing into a steady rhythm. Cheers erupted from the Velithians, their crystalline forms glowing brighter with relief. Yet Kale noticed something different this time. Their expressions weren't just ones of gratitude. There was curiosity there, too. A few Velithians approached him cautiously, asking questions about his methods and motivations. Some even expressed admiration for his creativity and determination, but the real turning point came when the ambassador pulled him aside after the repairs were complete. She led him to a quiet corner of the city, where the glow of the dying star bathed everything in a soft, golden hue. Her crown rested lightly on her head, its threads pulsing gently, almost in sync with her breathing. "You continue to surprise me, human," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Why do you persist? Why take such risks for a species that has shown you little respect?" Kale hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because giving up isn't an option," he replied finally. "When something breaks, we fix it. When someone needs help, we step in. That's what being human means. It's not about perfection or logic. It's about caring enough to try, even when the odds are against us." The ambassador studied him intently, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the fading light. For the first time, Kale saw vulnerability in her gaze, a crack in the polished exterior of the Velithian ideal. "Caring," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "It is unfamiliar, and yet I see its power. Is this what drives your people? It's part of it, Kale admitted. We're flawed, sure, but those flaws make us who we are. They push us to grow, to adapt, to find solutions where none seem possible. The ambassador didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned, her gaze toward the distant stars, her form shimmering faintly. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of resolve. Perhaps it is time we learn from your flaws, human. Our empire has thrived on order and precision, but perhaps order alone cannot sustain life. Perhaps we need something more. Her words sent a shiver down Kale's spine. For the first time, he sensed a shift, not just in her perspective, but in the Velithian mindset as a whole. The ambassador's acknowledgement of humanity's strengths marked a pivotal moment, one that could change the course of their relationship forever. But as Kale followed her back to the main chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest challenges still lay ahead. The dissenters wouldn't abandon their skepticism so easily, and the instability threatening the Velithian cities showed no signs of abating. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, one thing was clear: humanity had proven itself capable of making a difference. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to inspire hope even among the stars as they walked side by side. The ambassador glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Tell me, human," she said softly, "what would you do if the roles were reversed? If your world faced such chaos, would you trust outsiders to help?" Kale smiled faintly. "I'd want them to care as much as we do." Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable yet piercing. In that moment, Kale realized that the true battle wasn't against failing conduits or dying stars. It was against doubt, fear, and the walls that separated species. And somehow, he knew they were beginning to break those walls down. The fragile alliance between humans and Velithians began to show cracks under the mounting pressure. Each stabilized conduit brought temporary relief, but the instability was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Entire cities were collapsing into cascading failures, their crystalline structures shattering like glass under the strain of unchecked energy surges. Refugees fled in droves, their glowing forms dimming with exhaustion and despair. The once pristine empire of light and symmetry now resembled a fractured mosaic, its beauty overshadowed by chaos. Kale's team worked tirelessly alongside the Velithians, their efforts becoming increasingly desperate. Sleep became a luxury none could afford, and the lines between human ingenuity and Velithian precision blurred as they collaborated in ways neither species had imagined possible. Yet for every success, there were setbacks, conduits that refused to stabilize, systems that buckled despite their best efforts. The stakes grew higher with each passing day, and the weight of failure loomed over them all. Among the Velithians, dissent simmered just beneath the surface. Elder Zereth and his faction grew bolder, openly questioning the ambassador's reliance on humanity. "They are reckless," he declared during a tense council meeting aboard the Prism Nexus. His jagged form shimmered angrily, casting sharp reflections across the chamber. "Their methods are chaotic, unpredictable. How can we trust such beings with the fate of our people?" The ambassador stood firm, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "Because without them, we would have already failed," she countered. "Their creativity and resilience have saved countless lives. Would you rather cling to pride and watch our empire crumble?" Her words silenced the room momentarily, but the dissenters weren't swayed. They argued that humanity's involvement undermined Velithian sovereignty, that relying on outsiders made them appear weak. Kale watched silently from the sidelines, feeling the weight of their scrutiny. He knew the ambassador was risking much to defend him and his team, and while her support bolstered their cause, it also deepened the divide within her own ranks. As tensions escalated, so did the challenges. One particularly critical mission took Kale and his team to a remote city perched dangerously close to a collapsing star. The energy conduit there was unlike anything they'd encountered before, a massive, pulsating structure embedded directly into the heart of the city. Its instability radiated outward, causing tremors that threatened to tear the entire settlement apart. "This is impossible," muttered one of the human engineers as they surveyed the scene. If we mess this up, the whole city goes down. Kale clenched his jaw, staring at the conduit with a mix of determination and dread. We don't have a choice, he said firmly. If we don't try, everyone here dies. The Velithians hesitated, their usual confidence shaken by the magnitude of the task. For the first time, they deferred to Kale's leadership, trusting his instincts over their calculations. Together, the combined team devised an audacious plan. They would channel the excess energy through a series of improvised buffers, redirecting it away from the city and into the void of space. It was risky, untested, and entirely unprecedented, but it was their only shot. As they worked, the pressure mounted. The conduit's pulses grew more erratic, sending shockwaves rippling through the city. Buildings cracked, streets buckled, and panicked citizens fled in every direction. Kale moved with grim focus, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. The Velithians mirrored his resolve, their crystalline forms glowing brighter as they poured their collective strength into stabilizing the system. At one point, disaster nearly struck when a buffer overloaded, threatening to explode and take half the team with it. Without hesitation, Kale stepped forward, using his body to shield the others as he manually adjusted the flow of energy. The heat seared his skin and pain lanced through him, but he held on until the surge subsided. When he finally stumbled back, gasping for breath, the Velithians stared at him in stunned silence. Why would you risk yourself like that? One of them asked, their voice trembling with emotion. You could have died. Kale wiped sweat from his brow, forcing a weary smile. Because if I didn't, you might have. We're in this together. That moment marked a turning point, not just for the mission, but for the relationship between humans and Velithians. Seeing Kale's selflessness firsthand forced the aliens to confront their preconceptions about humanity. These creatures they had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant were proving themselves capable of extraordinary courage and sacrifice. Even Elder Zirith fell silent, his jagged form dimming slightly as he absorbed the implications. By the time the conduit stabilized, the city was battered but intact. Exhausted cheers erupted from both humans and Velithians, their voices blending into a single, harmonious note of triumph. Yet even as they celebrated, Kale felt no sense of victory. There were still too many cities at risk, too many lives hanging in the balance. And worse, the source of the instability remained unknown, a shadowy threat lurking at the heart of the Velithian network. The ambassador approached him after the mission, her crown glowing faintly against the backdrop of the damaged city. You amaze me, human, she said softly. Your kind fights not for glory or recognition, but because it is right. Tell me what drives such unity among your people? Kale thought for a moment before answering. It's simple, really. We stand together because we know what happens when we don't. Alone, we're vulnerable. Together, we're unstoppable. Her multifaceted eyes softened, reflecting the fading light of the collapsing star. Perhaps that is the lesson we needed most, she murmured. Unity not born of order, but of shared purpose. But as she turned to leave, Kale noticed something troubling, a small group of Velithians whispering urgently in the distance. Among them was Elder Zirith, his form shimmering with renewed hostility. Whatever they were planning, it couldn't be good, and Kale feared it might undo everything they had fought so hard to achieve. The climax was building, and Kale knew the hardest battle was yet to come. Not just against failing conduits or collapsing stars, but against doubt, fear, and the shadows of mistrust that still lingered between their two species. As he looked out over the fractured city, he realized that humanity's greatest test wasn't proving itself, it was inspiring others to believe in something greater. And somewhere, deep within the heart of the Velithian Empire, the true enemy stirred, waiting for its moment to strike. The final confrontation came not in the form of a collapsing star or destabilized conduit, but in the revelation of betrayal. As Kale and his team prepared for what they hoped would be their last major mission, a desperate attempt to stabilize the central nexus of the Velithian energy grid, they uncovered evidence that someone within the Empire had been sabotaging their efforts all along. It began with subtle anomalies, readings that didn't add up, conduits failing moments after repairs were completed, and patterns of instability that defied natural causes. At first, Kale dismissed these as quirks of alien technology, but when an entire section of the grid collapsed, just hours after being declared stable, he knew something was wrong. Someone or something was deliberately undermining their work. The discovery came during a routine diagnostic scan aboard the Prism Nexus. One of Kale's engineers, a young woman named Riya Patel, noticed irregularities in the data logs. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the holographic projections. "These fluctuations, they're too precise, like someone programmed them." Kale leaned closer, studying the patterns. "You think this is sabotage?" Riya nodded grimly. "I think so. And if I'm right, then whoever's doing this has access to our systems and knows exactly how to exploit them." Before Kale could respond, the ambassador entered the room, her crown glowing faintly. "What have you found?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. Kale hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But the ambassador's trust in humanity had earned their honesty. "We think there's a saboteur," he said bluntly. "Someone inside your empire is working against us." Her crystalline form shimmered faintly, betraying her shock. "Impossible. No Velithian would endanger their own kind." "Not every threat comes from within your species," Kale replied carefully. "Could it be one of the dissenters? Someone who opposes your alliance with humans?" The ambassador's gaze hardened. "Elder Zirith," she whispered, her voice carrying both anger and sorrow. "He has opposed me at every turn. But to go this far?" Kale stepped forward, his tone firm. "If we don't act now, everything we've worked for will be lost. We need to expose him before he destroys the central nexus." With the ambassador's support, Kale and his team devised a plan to confront Elder Zirith. They tracked his movements through the ship's surveillance systems, uncovering evidence of his involvement in the sabotage. Hidden log files revealed that he had been tampering with critical systems, using advanced algorithms to mimic natural failures and mask his actions. Worse still, he had enlisted a small faction of like-minded Velithians to aid him, believing that humanity's interference threatened the purity of their empire. When confronted, Elder Zirith did not deny his role. Instead, he stood defiant, his jagged form glowing fiercely as he addressed the gathered crowd of humans and Velithians. "You call yourselves saviors, yet you bring chaos wherever you tread." He spat, his voice cutting through the chamber like shards of broken glass. "Your methods are reckless, your emotions uncontrollable. You weaken us with your presence." Kale stepped forward, meeting the elder's glare with unwavering resolve. "And what about you? What gives you the right to decide who lives and who dies? Your pride nearly destroyed your people." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then the ambassador spoke, her voice resonating with quiet authority. "Enough, Zirith. Your actions have endangered millions. If not for these humans, our cities would already lie in ruins. Your fear of change blinded you to the truth. We needed their help." Zirith's form shimmered angrily, but he said nothing. More, defeated, he lowered his head and allowed himself to be escorted away by other Velithians. His faction dissolved quickly afterward, their loyalty shaken by the exposure of his crimes. With the saboteur neutralized, Kale and his team turned their focus to the central nexus, the heart of the Velithian energy grid. It was a towering structure of interwoven crystal strands, pulsating erratically with unstable power. Stabilizing it would require unprecedented cooperation between humans and Velithians, blending their respective strengths into a single, unified effort. As they worked, Kale felt a profound shift in the atmosphere. The Velithians no longer viewed humanity as outsiders or inferiors. Instead, they saw partners, beings whose flaws and emotions complemented their own precision and logic. Together, they created something neither species could have achieved alone, a harmonious balance of order and creativity. Finally, after hours of grueling effort, the nexus stabilized. Its erratic pulses smoothed into a steady rhythm, and the surrounding cities flickered back to life. Cheers erupted from both humans and Velithians, their voices blending into a symphony of triumph. For the first time, the barriers between their species seemed to dissolve, replaced by a shared sense of purpose and accomplishment. As the celebration unfolded, the ambassador approached Kale, her crown glowing softly in the restored light. "You have done more than save our empire, human," she said, her multifaceted eyes reflecting gratitude and wonder. "You have shown us the strength of imperfection, the power of unity born not from logic, but from heart." Kale smiled faintly, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. "We're stronger together," he replied simply. "That's what makes us human." Her gaze lingered on him, filled with newfound respect. In that moment, Kale realized that the breakthrough wasn't just technical, it was emotional. The Velithians had finally seen humanity for what it truly was, flawed, resilient and capable of greatness when united by hope and compassion. But as the ambassador turned to address her people, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Humanity had proven itself among the stars, but the galaxy was vast and countless challenges still lay ahead. For now, though, they had taken their first step toward a brighter future, one built not on superiority, but on mutual understanding. And somewhere deep within the hearts of the Velithians, a seed of change had been planted, a belief that perhaps the universe was better off with humanity in it. The stabilization of the central nexus marked a turning point not only for the Velithian empire but for humanity's place in the galaxy. The once dying cities, now restored to their former brilliance, floated serenely in orbit around the dying stars that powered them. Their crystalline spires shimmered with renewed light, casting prismatic reflections across the void, a testament to the unity between two vastly different species. Yet the true victory lay not in the repaired conduits or saved lives, but in the shift of perspective that had taken root within the Velithians. As Kale stood aboard the Prism Nexus, gazing out at the restored empire, he felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment tempered by humility. He wasn't just looking at alien architecture. He was witnessing the birth of a new era, one where humanity was no longer dismissed as irrelevant but recognized as indispensable. The ambassador approached him, her crown glowing softly against the backdrop of the revitalized cities. "You have changed us," she said simply, her voice resonating like a gentle melody. "Not through force or persuasion, but through action. You showed us what it means to care not for perfection, but for life itself." Kale turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "We didn't do it alone. You trusted us when others wouldn't. That trust made all the difference." Her multifaceted eyes softened, reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. "Trust is fragile, human, but it is also powerful. It has allowed us to see beyond our own limitations and to embrace imperfection as a source of strength." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of everything they had accomplished hanging between them. Then the ambassador extended a hand, a gesture so simple yet profound that it caught Kale off guard. Her crystalline fingers refracted the light into a kaleidoscope of colors, each hue representing a fragment of the journey they had shared. Slowly, hesitantly, Kale reached out and clasped her hand. The connection sent a shiver through him, not from physical sensation but from the realization of how far they had come together. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying a depth of emotion he hadn't heard before, "for saving us, for teaching us, for reminding us of what truly matters." Kale smiled faintly, his grip tightening slightly. "And thank you for seeing us, for believing in us. Not every species gets a second chance to prove themselves." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Elder Zirith, or rather, what remained of him. Stripped of his position and influence, he now served as a humble aide to the ambassador, tasked with repairing the damage he had caused. His jagged form shimmered dimly, a shadow of its former self, but there was something humbling about his presence. As he passed by, he paused briefly, meeting Kale's gaze with an unreadable expression. "I underestimated you," he admitted gruffly, his voice devoid of its usual arrogance. Perhaps there is value in your kind after all." Before Kale could respond, the elder moved on, disappearing into the crowd of Velithians who were busy rebuilding their world. Though the words were spoken reluctantly, they carried significance, a sign that even those most resistant to change could be swayed by acts of courage and compassion. In the days that followed, the relationship between humans and Velithians continued to evolve. The ambassador announced the formation of a joint council, bringing together leaders from both species to address challenges facing the galaxy. Humanity's seat at the table was no longer questioned, it was earned. Engineers, scientists, and diplomats began collaborating on projects aimed at preventing future crises, while cultural exchanges fostered mutual understanding and respect. Back on Earth's orbital station, Solus Prime news of the Alliance sparked celebration and reflection. For too long, humanity had struggled to find its footing among older, more advanced civilizations. Now they had proven that innovation and empathy could bridge even the widest gaps. Captain Ria Torres, once skeptical of the mission, addressed the crew with pride in her voice. "We've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of," she declared. "Not because we're perfect, but because we never give up, because we care." Kale returned to Earth shortly thereafter, greeted as a hero but content to remain in the background. He resumed his work as a mechanic, fixing drones and spaceships, with the same determination that had saved an empire. Yet he often found himself gazing at the stars, remembering the ambassador's words and wondering what other adventures awaited humanity in the vastness of space. One evening, as he sat alone in his workshop, a holographic message flickered to life before him. It was from the ambassador, transmitted from light years away. Her image shimmered faintly, her crown glowing softly against the darkness. "Human," she began, her voice warm and familiar. "Though our paths may diverge, know this, your actions have left an indelible mark upon my people and upon me. Should you ever wish to return, you will always have a place among us." Kale stared at the message, a lump forming in his throat. He didn't need to respond. The ambassador's gratitude spoke volumes. As the transmission faded, leaving only the soft hum of his tools behind, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. The galaxy had changed because of what humans had done, not through conquest or superiority, but through heart and resilience. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly hold new challenges, Kale knew one thing for certain: humanity's greatest strength lay not in its technology or intellect, but in its ability to connect, to find common ground even with beings made of light and crystal. As he turned back to his work, a single thought lingered in his mind, echoing like a whisper among the stars.